I was looking at some figures, and after 9.5 months of the year, you'd only spent approximately half your capital budget. Now, my suspicion is that the 52 million allocated to the Rural Regeneration Fund, I'm curious as to whether you're going to spend 52 million on rural regeneration, or are you going to find some other way to spend the money? Because, as you know, and I know, we hate giving the money back to the Exchequer.
Minister.
Development Fund seeks to support ambitious and strategic projects which have the potential to transform rural economies and communities. The Government has committed £1 billion over 10 years to the fund, and £315 million is allocated to the fund for the period 2019 to 2022. £52 million was allocated to the fund in 2019. Following the conclusion of the first call under the fund in February 2019, a total of 84 successful projects has been announced, with funding of £86 million provided from the fund to support projects worth a total of £117 million. Significant progress has already been made on the implementation of these projects. A number of the projects have already reached the first progress milestone, and funding has been released. To date, a total of 16 million has been drawn down from the fund by 29 separate projects, and I expect that payments from the fund will continue to accelerate over the coming weeks and months. Notwithstanding this progress, due to the requirement for due diligence and the time it takes for projects of the size to be supported by the fund to carry out procurement and get fully up and running, it is clear that the savings will likely materialise in the subhead this year. In that regard, I am pleased that the demand under the LEADER programme has ramped up significantly this year, and while I initially allocated 30 million to the LEADER programme, expenditure already stands at approximately 33.3 million. Given the strong performance, I have therefore allocated an additional 10 million to this programme to cater for the increase in 2019. This has been reallocated from the savings to be realised under the Rural Regeneration and Development subhead this year. I will continue to monitor the spend, and my savings will be used to benefit the demands under rural and community programmes of this department. The improved activity of the LEADER programme is a very welcome development, with over 2,400 projects now being funded across Ireland. Indeed, in this regard, I announced this week an additional allocation of 5 million to 10 LAGs most advanced in delivering the programme. These projects, along with the major strategic projects being processed through the Rural Regeneration Development Fund, are delivering significant economic and social development in rural areas throughout the country. I expect to make an announcement on further rural regeneration scheme shortly, and I'm very pleased with the great interest in the fund.
Deputy.
Minister, I applaud you for transferring the money to LEADER, and I'm glad it's spending well, even if it's late in the day for it to start. That still leaves you 42 million in the fund, 16 million spent. So in about 6 to 7 weeks, you're going to spend 26 million. Are you still confident that that 26 million will be drawn down by the end of the year? Or are there other places you could spend the money? For example, have you considered more money in LIS, but I understand your spend is slow there. And again, we don't know whether the spend is slow because the work isn't done or because you're not getting the build, and this is a perennial problem that is faced by the department. Or would you consider, for example, asking local authorities to do some Class 3 county roads, which, as you know, are in very poor condition? But I think quick decisions need to be made, quick call made. Are you going to, for example, have another 10 million in hand, which would allow 16 million spent in less than 2 months, compared to the 60 million in 9.5 months? And should you now make a quick decision to move the money into other funds and get spent on it? Because it's no good coming in the beginning of December trying to do that.
Minister.
Well, Deputy, I'm quite confident that all my funding programmes are on profile. In relation to the Rural Regeneration Scheme, I know I won't spend it all, but I'm confident that a substantial amount of that money will be spent between now and the end of the year. There's many projects, and some in my own county, some in your county, that are completed and that will be drawn down between now and the end of the year. In relation to reprofiling the money, yes, I'm looking at ways and means, but I have a big problem now with LEADER. With the way that it's ramping up, and there's no doubt about it that the money is being drawn down, and I certainly will have to find more money for Leader between now and the end of the year, which is a good thing. But I'll give you one commitment, and I know that you have been saying this for the last 2 years. Last year, I spent 100% of my capital funding, as I did the year before. This year, or last year, the only savings I had, I spent 99.9% on current, and we made a bit of savings on staffing and IT equipment. So it was only small. So I spent my money at 100%.
Thank you, Minister.
And the one commitment I'll give you, the same will happen this year. And I hope that I'll have enough of money that I don't have to be.
Sorry, Minister.
Minister, presumably you're going to get the same amount of money for the Rural Regeneration Fund for next year as you've got for... Well, can I ask you, therefore, when are you going to let the next tranche of applications, well, when are you going to approve them, the next tranche of applications? You've had them for some time. Because the quicker stuff gets out before the end of this year, the quicker people get started, and the more likely you are not to be shifting money around towards the end of next year. So, Minister, when are you going to announce the next tranche of projects under the Rural Regeneration Fund? I mean approvals now, not calls, approvals. And when are you going to have the next round of calls for projects under the same fund?
Thank you, Deputy Minister, to conclude on this question.
I have to say, first of all, Deputy, that I'm very pleased with my officials. We have done very well. I'm very proud of the department in relation to the way that our road regeneration scheme, that this is going to be our second call. I don't think any of the other schemes have had a second call yet. Very proud of them. You asked a question. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, I intend to have the announcement in relation to the road regeneration scheme. There's some things I don't agree with you on, but there's some things I do agree with you on. There's one thing that I do agree with you. I need to keep the schemes moving, and even though the officials, as you know, don't like you to be spending money ahead, because at some stage, like the Leader, it's going to catch up on you. But the rural regeneration scheme is a fantastic scheme. It does take time, and it does take time. You need, a year or two of allocations, so eventually the thing will level itself out. I'm very proud of the department, the way they have worked. We had a scheme last September. We opened it again in August, or we closed it in August, and in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I will be announcing the successful applications. And I can tell you, it will be open early again in the new year for the second round. There's 1 billion over 10 years. The money is there. Next year, we have an increase in our budget in relation to the rural regeneration scheme.
Moving on to
as the years goes on, there's going to be a bigger drawdown for it.
Deputy Ruth